The massive space station hung in the void like a glittering jewel. Its silver walls stretched for miles in every direction, home to the greatest diplomatic achievement in galactic history, the Galactic Council. Today, something special was happening. For the first time in 300 years, a new species was asking to join. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the gleaming corridors, her black hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her blue diplomatic uniform was perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. Behind her walked 3 other humans. Dr. James Park carried a briefcase full of scientific data. Ms. Elena Rodriguez held cultural reports and trade agreements. And Colonel Marcus Rivera wore his dress uniform, medals catching the light. They had traveled for months to reach this moment, Earth's first chance to join the galactic community. The council chamber was enormous. 12 raised platforms surrounded a central speaking area, each one designed for a different alien species. Sarah had studied them all, but seeing them in person still amazed her. The Veltar looked like tall, graceful deer that walked on 2 legs. Their fur was silver and their eyes were large and gentle. They spoke in musical voices that sounded like wind chimes. The Zephyrians reminded Sarah of rabbits, but rabbit people who wore robes and had wise, ancient eyes. Their leader twitched his nose constantly, a nervous habit that made Sarah want to smile. The Corvin moved slowly and deliberately. Their turtle-like shells gleamed under the chamber lights. When they spoke, every word was carefully chosen. The Avians had feathers instead of hair and beaks instead of mouths. They made soft cooing sounds when they agreed with something. All 12 species had one thing in common that Sarah had noticed in her research. Every single one had evolved from prey animals. Creatures that ran from danger instead of facing it. Creatures that hid when predators came hunting. It made sense, Sarah thought. Only species that were good at avoiding conflict would live long enough to reach the stars. Only peaceful creatures would work together to build something like the Galactic Council. Chairman Esselin, the leader of the Veltar, stood gracefully. Her voice rang like silver bells across the chamber. "We welcome the delegation from Earth," she said, "though we must admit we have concerns about your species." Sarah stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you, Chairman. We are honored to be here. What concerns can we address?" Esselin's large eyes blinked slowly. "Your people seem very energetic. Your ships move aggressively. Your messages are direct and forceful. We worry about your intentions." Sarah had expected this. Every species in the council preferred indirect communication. They hinted instead of demanding. They suggested instead of commanding. Humans, by comparison, seemed rude and pushy. "We understand your concerns," Sarah replied carefully. "Humans can be direct, but we mean no harm. We simply wish to learn from your wisdom and contribute to galactic peace." Dr. Park stepped forward when Sarah nodded to him. He was a small, gentle man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "We have brought extensive data about human achievements," he said softly. "Our scientific discoveries, our art, our commitment to knowledge." He activated a holographic display. Images of Earth appeared in the air above them. Beautiful cities, vast libraries, space telescopes exploring distant stars. The council members leaned forward with interest. Ms. Rodriguez spoke next about human culture. She showed them music from around the world, paintings and sculptures, literature translated into galactic common language. Her voice was warm and friendly as she explained human customs. The aliens nodded politely. Some even made approving sounds, but Sarah could see they were not convinced. To them, humans were newcomers, primitive creatures who had only recently learned to travel between stars. What could such young species possibly offer? Chairman Esselin was about to speak when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The peaceful chamber erupted in worried chittering and clicking sounds. A Corvin technician slowly raised his head above his control panel. "Chairman," he said in his deep, slow voice. "Long-range sensors detect an approaching fleet." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant humming of the station system seemed to quiet. "What kind of fleet?" Esselin asked, though her tone suggested she already feared the answer. "Void swarm signatures, Chairman. 47 vessels detected, including 3 hive ships." The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several council members gasped. The Zephyrian representative began shaking. An Avian delegate made a high, frightened sound. Sarah looked at Colonel Rivera. His expression had changed slightly, though she could not quite say how. His eyes seemed more focused. His posture had shifted from parade rest to something more alert. "How far away?" Rivera asked quietly. The Corvin technician consulted his readings. "At current speed, they will arrive in 38 hours. Chairman Esselin stood quickly, her graceful movements sharp with fear. "Emergency protocols are now in effect. All diplomatic proceedings are suspended. Evacuation procedures begin immediately." She turned to Sarah with what might have been regret in her large eyes. "Ambassador Chen, we deeply apologize. Your membership hearing must be postponed indefinitely. We hope you understand." Sarah nodded. "Of course, Chairman. Is there anything we can do to help?" "Thank you. But evacuation is a matter for the Council species. We have done this many times before. Our ships will arrive within hours to begin transport." Rivera stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost casual. "What about defensive preparations?" The chamber fell silent again. This time the silence was different. It was the silence of creatures that did not understand what they had just heard. Esselin tilted her head like a confused deer. "Defensive preparations?" "Military preparations," Rivera clarified. "Ships, weapons, battle plans." A Zephyrian delegate spoke up, his voice trembling. "Colonel Rivera, perhaps you do not understand. This is the Void Swarm. They cannot be fought. They can only be avoided. They have terrorized our galaxy for thousands of years," added an Avian representative. "No one fights the swarm and lives." Rivera's eyes had definitely changed now. Sarah could see it clearly. There was something different about the way he looked at the tactical displays. Something that made her remember that Marcus Rivera had earned his rank in humanity's worst conflicts. "How many people are on this station?" he asked. 50,000, replied the Corvin technician. "And your evacuation ships can carry how many?" The technician checked his data slowly. "Approximately 30,000. The math was simple and terrible. 20,000 beings would be left behind when the swarm arrived." Rivera looked at Sarah. She saw something in his eyes that the aliens could not recognize. Something that spoke of humanity's long history of facing impossible odds. "I need to make a call," Rivera said quietly. Chairman Esselin barely looked up from her evacuation plans. "Of course, Colonel. You may use any communication system you require." As Rivera walked toward the communication booth, Sarah noticed something else changing. Dr. Park was no longer the gentle scientist she knew. His eyes had sharpened. He was studying the tactical displays with an intensity that seemed out of place on his kind face. Even Ms. Rodriguez had changed. Her warm diplomatic smile had faded, replaced by something cooler and more calculating. Sarah realized that for months, they had been showing the Council exactly what they expected to see. Peaceful diplomats, harmless scientists, polite cultural representatives. They had never seen what humans became when something threatened their people. That was about to change. The Void Swarm was coming, and 47 ships full of predators were about to meet something they had never encountered before. Another predator species that had forgotten how to run. The evacuation ships began arriving within hours. Sarah watched from the observation deck as sleek vessels approached the station. Each ship was beautiful in its own way, designed by species that valued grace over power. The Veltar ships looked like silver leaves floating through space. The Zephyrian vessels were round and smooth, built for quick escapes. The Corvin ships were heavily armored but slow, like space-going turtles carrying their homes on their backs. All of them shared one design philosophy: they were built to run. Sarah had read about the Void Swarm during her preparation for this mission. Every species in the galaxy knew their story. They had appeared suddenly about 3,000 years ago, emerging from the dark space between galaxies. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. What everyone knew was what they did. The swarm consumed everything. They would arrive at a populated world and strip it completely bare. Every plant, every animal, every building, everything would be broken down and absorbed. When they left, nothing remained but empty rock floating in space. Worse, they seemed to enjoy the fear they caused. Survivors reported that the swarm would sometimes leave a few beings alive just long enough to watch their world die. They fed on terror as much as they fed on matter. The galaxy's response had been simple and effective. Run, hide, evacuate everything that could be saved, and abandon the rest. It was not heroic, but it worked. The prey species had survived for 3 millennia using this strategy. Chairman Esselin moved through the evacuation center with calm efficiency. Her people had done this many times before. They knew exactly how to organize the scared civilians, how to load the most important supplies, how to prioritize who would be saved first. The young and healthy went first. They could contribute to rebuilding. Next came the skilled workers and scientists. Government officials and cultural leaders were loaded onto specially protected ships. Finally, if there was room, they would take the elderly and disabled. It was cruel but practical. When faced with an unstoppable enemy, you saved who you could and mourned the rest later. Sarah found Dr. Park standing near a tactical display, studying the incoming swarm fleet. His gentle demeanor had not returned since the alarms began. His eyes moved across the data with mechanical precision. "Interesting attack formation," he said quietly. 3 hive ships in the center, protected by rings of smaller vessels. Classic pack hunting behavior, Sarah blinked. Pack hunting? The smaller ships drive prey toward the hive ships like wolves herding sheep toward the alpha predators. Very efficient. Park's voice carried no emotion. The hive ships are approximately 2 kilometers long. Heavily armored. Multiple weapon systems. "James," Sarah said carefully, "you sound like you're analyzing them for weaknesses." Park looked at her with eyes that seemed to belong to a different person. "Aren't you?" Before Sarah could answer, Colonel Rivera returned from the communication center. His face was grim, but there was something else there, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "I've been in contact with Earth," he announced. "Admiral Stone is en route with the UES Predator. She'll arrive in 18 hours. Esselin overheard and approached them. "Colonel, we appreciate any assistance with the evacuation, but one ship cannot carry many people." Rivera's expression was unreadable. "The Predator isn't coming to evacuate anyone, Chairman." "Then why?" "She's coming to fight." The words fell into the bustling evacuation center like stones into still water. Conversation stopped. Alien faces turned toward Rivera with expressions of confusion and horror. Esselin's graceful features twisted with disbelief. "Colonel Rivera, perhaps you do not understand. The Void Swarm cannot be fought. It has never been done." "It is impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Rivera replied calmly. "Just difficult." A Zephyrian official hopped forward, his ears flat against his head with fear. "Colonel, your species is young. You do not understand the swarm's power. They have destroyed entire civilizations. They have turned whole star systems into empty space." Rivera nodded. "I've read the reports. Impressive kill count." The casual way he said it made several aliens step backward. There was something in Rivera's tone that they could not identify but instinctively feared. Ms. Rodriguez appeared beside them, no longer the warm cultural attaché from the morning. Her smile was gone, replaced by the focused expression of someone calculating odds. "Chairman," she said politely, "could we access your historical database, specifically records of swarm attack patterns and ship capabilities?" "Why would you need know your enemy?" Park interrupted softly. "Basic tactical principle." Esselin stared at the 3 humans as if seeing them for the first time. "You speak as if you intend to hunt them." The words hung in the air for a long moment. Then Rivera smiled, and every prey species in the room felt their ancient instincts scream warnings. "That's exactly what we intend to do." The evacuation continued around them, but now the aliens worked with nervous glances toward the human delegation. Word spread quickly through the station. The newcomers, the primitive species that had just arrived, were talking about fighting the Void Swarm. Some aliens thought it was ignorance. Others suspected it might be madness. A few wondered if it might be something else entirely. Dr. Park spent the next several hours studying every piece of data the Council had collected about the swarm. Battle records, ship specifications, attack patterns. He read like a machine, absorbing information with frightening efficiency. Ms. Rodriguez worked through diplomatic channels, quietly requesting access to communication networks, supply manifests, and station schematics. Her requests were polite but persistent. Colonel Rivera established contact with every human ship within 50 light years. His messages were brief and coded, but the responses came quickly. Ships began changing course toward the Council station. Sarah watched her colleagues work and realized something that chilled her. This was not the desperate preparation of people facing certain death. This was the methodical planning of predators preparing for a hunt. When Chairman Esselin approached her again, the Veltar leader's voice carried a note of pleading. "Ambassador Chen, please reconsider. The evacuation ships can take your delegation to safety. There is no shame in retreat when facing the swarm. Sarah looked at the evacuation center where thousands of beings prepared to abandon their homes and flee into the darkness. Children cried as they were separated from their belongings. Elderly beings sat quietly, knowing they might be left behind. "Chairman," Sarah said quietly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "In 3,000 years of running from the swarm, has anyone ever tried to understand why they hunt?" Esselyn blinked her large eyes. "What do you mean?" "Predators hunt for reasons. Food, territory, resources. The swarm strips worlds bare, but they don't seem to need what they take. They destroy everything, then leave. Why? We do not know. Perhaps they are simply evil." Sarah shook her head. "Nothing is simply evil. Everything has a reason. And if something has a reason, it has patterns. And if it has patterns, it has weaknesses," Rivera finished, appearing beside them. For the first time since the alarms began, Esselyn looked truly frightened, not of the coming swarm but of the humans standing before her. "What are you?" she whispered. Rivera's smile was sharp as a blade. "We're what happens when the prey evolves into predators." In the distance, the first human reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace. Their ships had names that suddenly seemed prophetic: Apex Hunter, Night Stalker, Pack Leader. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity looked like when it stopped pretending to be civilized. Admiral Catherine Stone arrived exactly when she promised. The UES Predator dropped out of hyperspace with a precision that made the alien observers nervous. It was not the largest ship they had seen, but something about it was different. Where the Council ships curved gracefully through space, the Predator moved like its name suggested: direct, purposeful, and dangerous. Sarah watched the Admiral dock through the observation windows. Even from a distance, she could see Stone's reputation was well earned. The Admiral moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle, mainly because she made sure to stack the odds in her favor before fighting began. When Admiral Stone entered the Council chamber an hour later, the change in atmosphere was immediate. The aliens, already nervous about human behavior, became visibly uncomfortable. Stone was tall, gray-haired, and carried herself like a weapon waiting to be used. Her first words confirmed their fears. "Colonel Rivera, status report. 47 swarm vessels approaching, Admiral. Estimated arrival in 14 hours. 3 hive ships, 32 fighters, 12 support vessels. Standard pack formation." Stone nodded as if discussing the weather. "Good, that's enough for a proper field test." Chairman Esselyn stepped forward nervously. "Admiral Stone, we appreciate your arrival, but we must insist that you join the evacuation. The swarm cannot be fought." Admiral Stone turned to look at the Veltar leader. Her gaze was steady and calculating. "Chairman, with respect, that's not true. The swarm has never been fought. There's a difference. But the risk is manageable if you understand your enemy and your own capabilities." Stone moved to the tactical display where Dr. Park was still studying swarm data. "Dr. Park, what have you learned?" Park looked up from his screens. The gentle scientist from the morning was completely gone. In his place was someone who spoke about death with clinical precision. "The swarm operates on pack-hunting instincts, Admiral. They surround, isolate, and overwhelm. But their tactics are 3,000 years old. They've never adapted because they've never needed to." "Explain." "Every species they've encountered uses the same defensive strategy: run and hide. The swarm has optimized their approach for chasing fleeing prey, not fighting an organized defense." Stone smiled, and several aliens shivered without knowing why. "Weaknesses? Their formations are designed to prevent escape, not to handle direct assault. The hive ships stay protected in the center because nothing has ever threatened them directly. And Admiral," Park paused, "they've never fought another pack hunter." Stone nodded. "Colonel Rivera, how many ships do we have available?" 18 so far, Admiral. More arriving hourly. The Apex Hunter will be here in 6 hours. Pack Leader is bringing her squadron." "Excellent, Ms. Rodriguez. I need complete station schematics and evacuation ship positions." Elena Rodriguez, who had been quietly networking through the station systems, handed over a datapad. "Already prepared, Admiral. I've also established back-channel communications with all evacuation fleets." Stone studied the information quickly. "Good, we'll need coordination." Chairman Esselyn watched this exchange with growing horror. "You cannot be serious. You cannot fight the Void Swarm with 18 ships. Not 18 ships, Chairman. 18 hunting vessels with experienced pack tactics." Stone's voice carried absolute certainty. We've been fighting pack predators for millions of years. We know how they think. But the swarm is different. No, Dr. Park interrupted softly. They're exactly the same. Apex predators who've never faced another apex predator. They're about to learn what that feels like. As if summoned by his words, more human ships began arriving. Each one moved with the same predatory grace as the predator. They did not take defensive positions around the station. Instead, they spread out into the void, taking positions that the aliens could not understand. Sarah realized the council members were seeing something they had never witnessed. Before a species preparing for war, instead of flight, the transformation in her fellow humans was now complete and undeniable. Ambassador Chen still looked diplomatic, but her voice carried new authority when she spoke to the aliens. Dr. Park had become a tactical analyst who discussed destroying ships the way he once discussed research papers. Ms. Rodriguez moved through the station like someone conducting a military operation, and Colonel Rivera moved like death itself. Admiral, he said quietly, the swarm will be in sensor range in 8 hours. When they see the evacuation ships, they'll adjust their approach to maximize psychological impact. Expected behavior. They'll target the slowest evacuation vessels first. Force the survivors to watch others die before hunting them down. Classic terror tactics, Stone nodded. Then we adjust our strategy accordingly. Dr. Park, I need to know how those hive ships communicate with their fighters. Park was already pulling up new data. Quantum entanglement network, Admiral. Real-time coordination across their entire fleet. Very sophisticated. Can it be disrupted? Not disrupted, Park said with a cold smile. But it can be hijacked. The aliens listening to this conversation began to understand something terrible. The humans were not preparing to defend the station. They were not planning to hold the swarm at bay while evacuations continued. They were planning to hunt. Chairman Esselin's voice was barely a whisper. What are you? Admiral Stone looked at her with something that might have been pity. Chairman, your species evolved from prey animals. You survived by running, hiding, and avoiding conflict. That shaped your entire civilization. Yes, and we have thrived. Humans evolved differently. Stone's voice was gentle but implacable. We come from apex predators. For millions of years, nothing on our world could challenge us except each other. We learned to hunt in coordinated packs. We learned to track our prey across vast distances. We learned to kill efficiently and without mercy. She gestured toward the tactical displays showing swarm approach vectors. We spent our entire evolutionary history learning to do exactly what the swarm does. Except we learned to do it better. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of ship systems and the distant sounds of evacuation efforts. Then a new alarm chimed softly. Long-range sensors detect additional human vessels approaching, reported the Corvin technician. Current count 37 ships. Rivera checked his communications. Admiral, the Night Stalker is requesting permission to begin advance reconnaissance. Granted. Tell Captain Martinez to probe their outer perimeter. I want to know how they react to being hunted. The words sent a chill through every alien in the chamber. For 3,000 years, the swarm had been the hunters. No one had ever turned the tables. Dr. Park looked up from his analysis. Admiral, I've found something interesting. The swarm has never retreated from a battle, not once in recorded history. Why is that interesting? Because predators that have never faced defeat don't know how to run. They've forgotten how to be prey. Park's smile was completely without warmth. They're about to remember. Outside the station, human ships continued to arrive. But they did not mass for defense. Instead, they dispersed into hunting formations that the council species could not recognize but somehow feared instinctively. Chairman Esselin watched the displays with growing dread. Ambassador Chen, she said quietly, what happens after you fight the swarm? Sarah looked at her with eyes that held depths the Veltar leader had never noticed before. That depends, Chairman. Do we win? I do not know. Then let me ask a different question. Sarah's voice was soft, but carried an edge that made Esselin step backward. After we destroy the swarm fleet, what do you think we'll do about the rest of their kind? The question hung in the air like a blade. Finally, Esselin understood what she was really asking. You mean to hunt them all? Sarah's smile was beautiful and terrible. We prefer the term pest control. In the void beyond the station, 47 swarm vessels approached their latest prey. They had done this thousands of times before. They expected fear, flight, and easy hunting. Instead, they were about to encounter something that would change the galaxy forever. They were about to become the hunted. The Void Swarm arrived exactly when predicted. 47 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light of distant stars. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. Then everything changed. The swarm's first indication that something was wrong came from their scouts. The small fighter craft that normally swept ahead of the main fleet to locate fleeing prey sent back confused reports. The evacuation ships were there, loaded with civilians and moving slowly away from the station. But they were not running in panic. They were moving in formation. Admiral Stone watched the tactical display from the Predator's bridge. Around her, the ship hummed with quiet efficiency. Her crew worked with the precision of a pack that had hunted together for years. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Davis. "Swarm scouts are probing the evacuation fleet. They seem confused by the organized withdrawal." "Expected. They're used to chasing scattered, terrified prey. Colonel Rivera, what's the swarm's next move?" Rivera, now stationed on the Predator's bridge, studied the enemy formation. "They'll send fighters to harass the evacuation ships, try to break their formation and create panic. When that fails, they'll commit the hive ships. Time frame? 20 minutes for harassment. Another hour before they bring in the heavy guns." Stone nodded. "Dr. Park, status on their communication network?" Park's voice came through the intercom from the ship's technical section. He had transformed completely from diplomatic scientist to military analyst. "I've mapped their quantum entanglement grid, Admiral. Ready to implement the virus on your command?" "Outstanding. Captain Martinez, report." The Night Stalker's captain answered from her position at the edge of the system. "We've identified the command structure, Admiral. The center hive ship is coordinating the entire attack. If we take it out, the others will lose cohesion." "Negative, Captain. We're not taking it out. We're taking it intact." Silence filled the communication channel. Finally, Martinez responded.
"Admiral, did you say intact?"
"Affirmative. Dr. Park believes we can learn their language and communication methods. I want to send a message to every swarm hive in the galaxy." "Understood, ma'am. It's your hunt." The first swarm fighters reached the evacuation fleet and immediately encountered something they had never seen before. The civilian ships did not scatter. Instead, they maintained formation while hidden weapon systems activated. The Council evacuation ships had been secretly modified. Human engineers working through Ms. Rodriguez's diplomatic channels had installed defensive systems during the last few hours. Nothing fancy, just enough to make the swarm fighters think twice. More importantly, the evacuation ships were not running randomly. They were moving according to a plan that Admiral Stone had designed specifically to manipulate swarm behavior. "They're responding as predicted," reported Rivera. "Fighters are pulling back to report. The hive ships are advancing to investigate." "Excellent. Begin Phase 2. Across the system, human ships that had been invisible suddenly appeared. They had been hiding in asteroid fields behind space debris and in the shadows of dead planets. The swarm had been so focused on the evacuation fleet that they had never thought to check their flanks. The UES pack leader emerged from behind a gas giant with 12 escort vessels. The Apex Hunter rose from the asteroid belt with her squadron. The Night Stalker abandoned stealth and began broadcasting targeting data to the entire human fleet. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Void Swarm found themselves surrounded. The reaction was immediate and violent. Swarm fighters turned to engage the human ships, abandoning their harassment of the evacuation fleet. The hive ships began to reposition, trying to bring their massive weapons to bear on these new threats. They discovered something that prey species had never taught them. Human ships moved differently. Where the Council vessels curved gracefully through space, human ships cut like knives. Where alien vessels fled when damaged, human ships pressed their attacks. Where prey species fought defensively, humans hunted with coordinated precision that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The first swarm fighter to engage the pack leader lasted exactly 14 seconds. Captain Williams had been hunting enemy fighters since before the swarm was born. Her ship moved like a living predator, anticipating the aliens' moves and striking with surgical precision. More fighters fell to the human pack. The swarm's tactics, perfected against fleeing prey, proved useless against organized predators who fought back. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez, The swarm fighters are trying to withdraw to the hive ships. Let them, Dr. Park. Implement the virus. Implementing now, ma'am. Across the swarm fleet, chaos erupted. Dr. Park's virus did not destroy their communications network. Instead, it fed false information into their quantum entanglement grid. Suddenly, swarm fighters received contradictory orders. Hive ships lost contact with their escorts. The perfect coordination that had made the swarm unstoppable for millennia began to collapse. Phase 3. Stone ordered calmly. The human fleet moved as one, not toward the swarm ships but around them. Like wolves circling wounded prey, they cut off escape routes and divided the enemy formation. The swarm's response was predictable. They had never faced coordinated resistance before. Their tactics were built on overwhelming scattered defenders. When faced with organized pack hunters, they fell back on raw aggression. The 3 hive ships charged forward, their massive bulk accelerating toward the human fleet. They intended to use their size and firepower to smash through the enemy line. They had made a critical error. They had abandoned their escorts. All ships, Stone broadcast calmly, execute Fenrir protocol. The human fleet scattered like leaves in the wind. But it was not panicked flight. It was coordinated dispersion, each ship moving to predetermined positions. The charging hive ships found themselves racing toward empty space, while human vessels surrounded them from all sides. The battle that followed was not like anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans did not try to destroy the hive ships with overwhelming firepower. Instead, they attacked with precision strikes that disabled specific systems. Engines first to prevent escape, then weapons to reduce their threat, finally life support systems to force surrender. The swarm had never learned to surrender. They fought until their ships were crippled hulks drifting in space. Admiral, reported Rivera, all 3 hive ships are disabled. Minimal casualties on our side. Outstanding. Marines, prepare for boarding operations. The words sent shockwaves through the watching council members. The humans were going to board the hive ships. They were going to capture swarm technology and, more importantly, swarm prisoners. Chairman Esselin watched in horror as human boarding shuttles approached the crippled swarm vessels. They're actually going inside those ships, she whispered. Ambassador Chen, who had been quietly observing the battle, smiled. My people have a saying, Chairman. If you want to understand your enemy, you have to get inside their head. We're being quite literal about it. The boarding operations proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Human Marines, armed with weapons designed for close combat, entered the alien vessels and methodically secured them section by section. The swarm defenders fought with desperate fury, but they had never faced humans in confined spaces. The same predatory instincts that made humans effective pack hunters served them well in the narrow corridors of enemy ships. Within 2 hours, all 3 hive ships were under human control. Admiral, came Dr. Park's voice over the intercom. We have live swarm prisoners and access to their central databases. I'm beginning translation protocols now. Stone nodded with satisfaction. Excellent work, Doctor. How long until we can communicate with them? Give me 6 hours, ma'am. Their language is complex, but I'm beginning to understand the patterns. Around the disabled swarm fleet, human ships maintained watchful positions. The remaining swarm fighters, leaderless and confused, drifted aimlessly through space. Some tried to escape. They were hunted down with methodical precision. Others attempted to self-destruct rather than face capture. Human technical teams prevented most of these attempts. A few simply went dormant as if hoping to be overlooked. They were collected like specimens. Admiral, reported Captain Martinez, all swarm vessels are secured. Total human casualties 3 wounded, none killed. Acknowledged. All ships maintain positions. Dr. Park, I want those translation protocols as soon as possible. Stone turned to look at the main display, where the captured swarm fleet drifted under human guard. For 3,000 years, these ships had been the terror of the galaxy. Now they were trophies, Colonel Rivera, she said quietly. Prepare a message for Earth Command. Tell them we need the First Fleet out here. The entire First Fleet, ma'am? Stone's smile was cold as space. We're going hunting, Colonel. And I suspect there are a lot more swarm fleets out there that need our attention. On the council station, the aliens watched in stunned silence as humanity began to dismantle the greatest threat their galaxy had ever known. They were beginning to understand that they had not just gained new allies, they had witnessed the awakening of apex predators who had been sleeping for far too long. 6 hours later, Dr. Park made the breakthrough that would change galactic history forever. "I can communicate with them," he announced to Admiral Stone and the assembled council members. His voice carried a mixture of scientific excitement and deep unease. "Their language is complex, but I've identified the key patterns." Chairman Esselin leaned forward nervously. "What have you learned?" Park hesitated before answering. When he spoke, his words chilled every alien in the room. "The Void Swarm calls itself the Eternal Hunt. They're not just raiders or conquerors. They're collectors. What do they collect?" Stone asked. "Fear, terror, the emotional energy released when intelligent beings face death." Park's face was pale. "They've been feeding on galactic terror for 3,000 years. Every time a world evacuates in panic, every time ships flee in desperation, they absorb that fear like nutrients." The council chamber fell silent. Finally, a Zephyrian delegate spoke in a trembling voice. "You mean, our strategy of running and hiding has been feeding them," Park confirmed. "Every successful evacuation, every narrow escape, every species that survived by fleeing, all of it generated the terror energy they needed to sustain themselves." Admiral Stone's expression darkened. "So the galaxy has been trapped in a cycle. The swarm attacks, species flee in terror, the swarm feeds on that terror and grows stronger." "Exactly, and there's more." Park activated a holographic display showing star maps. "I've accessed their navigation data. There aren't just 47 swarm ships. There are thousands of fleets scattered across the galaxy, millions of ships total." Several council members made sounds of despair. The Avian representative began to hyperventilate. A Corvin delegate slowly retreated into his shell, but the humans reacted differently. Colonel Rivera stepped forward to study the star maps. "Excellent. That gives us a comprehensive target list." Chairman Esselin stared at him in disbelief. "Colonel, you cannot be serious." "Millions of ships are now a known quantity," Admiral Stone interrupted calmly. "Dr. Park, what happens to a swarm fleet when it encounters something that doesn't fear it?" Park consulted his translation notes. "According to their records, it's never happened. Their entire biology is built around consuming terror. When they can't feed properly," he paused, "they begin to weaken and die. How long? Unknown. But the captured swarm warriors are already showing signs of distress." "They keep asking why we're not afraid of them." Stone smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Because fear is a prey response, Doctor, and we stopped being prey a very long time ago." A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Rivera checked his communications and nodded to Stone. "Admiral, Earth Command is requesting a priority briefing. Put them through." The holographic display shifted to show a conference room on Earth. Admiral Harrison, commander of fleet operations, appeared along with several other high-ranking officials. Behind them, Sarah could see the familiar blue-green curve of humanity's homeworld. "Admiral Stone," Harrison began without preamble, "your initial report was interesting. Please explain why you're requesting the entire First Fleet for what should have been a diplomatic mission." Stone gestured toward the tactical display showing the captured swarm vessels. "Sir, we've encountered a galaxy-wide threat that has been terrorizing local species for 3 millennia. More importantly, we've discovered that this threat has a critical weakness." "Explain." Dr. Park stepped forward. "Admiral Harrison, the Void Swarm feeds on fear. They've built their entire civilization around harvesting terror from other species. But humans produce a different emotional response when threatened. Which is anger," Colonel Rivera said simply. "We get angry. And angry humans don't run. They hunt." Admiral Harrison studied the data for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of command decisions that would reshape the galaxy. "Admiral Stone, you're authorized to use whatever resources necessary to eliminate this threat. I'm dispatching the 1st, 3rd, and 5th fleets to your position." "Sir, that's over 400 ships. Admiral, you've just told me that there are millions of hostile vessels in our new neighborhood that feed on the terror of our potential allies. How do you recommend we respond?" Stone's smile was sharp as a blade. "Total eradication, sir." "Agreed. Fleet Admiral Chen will coordinate the operation." Harrison paused. "Admiral, the President wants to know, how long do you estimate this will take?" Stone looked at the star maps showing swarm fleet positions across the galaxy. Her expression was calm and calculating. Sir, if we use standard wolfpack tactics and coordinate with local species for intelligence, I estimate 18 months for complete elimination of the swarm threat. The casual way she discussed genocide against an entire species made every alien in the chamber step backward. They were witnessing something unprecedented, the systematic planning of extermination by apex predators who had decided their prey was too dangerous to allow survival. Admiral Harrison nodded. Make it happen, Admiral. And Admiral? Yes, sir?
The President has authorized First Contact Protocol 7. Full diplomatic immunity and resource allocation for humanity's new allies.
Anyone who helps with this operation gets immediate trade partnerships and defensive pacts. Stone turned to look at Chairman Esselin. Chairman, would the Council be interested in assisting with intelligence gathering and logistics support? Esselin's voice was barely a whisper. What happens if we refuse? Ambassador Chen spoke for the first time since the battle ended. Her diplomatic mask was back in place, but underneath it, something predatory watched the alien leader. Then you continue living in fear while we clean up your neighborhood anyway. But, Chairman, she smiled, wouldn't you prefer to help us make sure the swarm never threatens anyone again? The vote was unanimous. Over the following days, the Council watched in fascination and terror as humanity transformed from diplomatic newcomers to galactic apex predators. Human fleets began arriving in massive numbers. Each ship was purpose-built for hunting and killing. The humans established forward bases with ruthless efficiency. They mapped swarm territories with precision that spoke of long experience in military campaigns. They coordinated with every species in the galaxy, gathering intelligence and resources for the largest extermination campaign in galactic history. But most disturbing of all, they enjoyed it. Sarah watched Colonel Rivera briefing a group of human captains on swarm hunting tactics. His eyes held the same predatory gleam she had first noticed when the crisis began. These were not reluctant warriors defending their homes. These were hunters who had found worthy prey. The key, Rivera was saying, is to never let them escape. Wounded swarm vessels will try to flee to warn other fleets. We need to ensure total information containment. What about prisoners, Colonel? Asked one captain. Take what we need for intelligence, then proceed with standard pest control protocols. The casual dehumanization of their enemies chilled even Sarah, and she was human. She could only imagine how it affected the aliens who were witnessing humanity's true nature for the first time. Chairman Esselin approached her as the briefing ended. Ambassador Chen, she said quietly, what have we done? You've allied yourselves with the dominant predator species in the galaxy, Sarah replied honestly. We'll protect you from threats like the swarm. We'll share our technology and knowledge. We'll be good neighbors and valuable trading partners. And if we displease you? Sarah's smile was gentle but implacable. Chairman, you're prey species. You survive by being smart enough not to displease predators. I'm sure you'll figure it out. As if summoned by her words, alarms chimed throughout the station. Dr. Park's voice echoed through the communication system. Admiral Stone to the command center. We've received a response from the swarm fleet at Rigel 7. Stone and her staff quickly assembled around the communication console. Park had been broadcasting messages to other swarm fleets using captured communication equipment, informing them of their defeat. What did they say, Doctor? Park's translation appeared on the screen. The Lesser Hunt acknowledges the death of Fleet Designation Gamma 7. We do not comprehend. How does prey destroy hunters? Stone dictated her response carefully. We are not prey. We are apex predators. Submit to immediate termination or face systematic eradication. The response came quickly. Impossible. Apex predators do not exist in this galaxy. We are the eternal hunt. Stone's smile was cold as winter. You were the eternal hunt. Now you're extinct. Dr. Park, send them the tactical recording of yesterday's battle. Several minutes passed before the next message arrived. When Park translated it, his voice carried wonder and fear. By the dark between stars. What are you? Admiral Stone looked around the command center at her officers, at the alien observers, at the displays showing human fleets moving into position across the galaxy. We're humans, she said simply, and your hunt is over. The first phase of humanity's galactic pest control operation began 3 days later. The galaxy would never be the same. For 3,000 years, the prey species had run from their predators. Now they had found bigger predators to protect them. The age of fear was ending. The age of humanity had begun, and in the dark between the stars, The Void Swarm learned what terror truly meant.